Hello, welcome to the Big Strategy Podcast. I'm your host and fellow strategist, Jeff Hyatt. This is your go-to spot for real talk with the masterminds of business strategy. It's about sharing stories, insights, and those little nuggets of wisdom to help you unlock big growth. Let's turn the key and spring into action. What I've learned is that the companies who are currently succeeding with AI aren't the ones with the best algorithm or access to the most compute power. Instead, they're the ones taking the page out of a design thinking playbook and taking time to ask the right questions. In the old analogy, they don't have hammers walking around looking for nails. Instead, they're looking at their workforce, they're looking at internal workflows, roles and responsibilities of established employees, not with the mindset of replacing those employees, but augment those humans so that we're getting 9 and 10 hours of work in a traditional 8-hour workday before going on and adding new headcount. That's the big takeaway. But underneath, there's 3 critical insights we're going to talk about in this recap session. Stick with me as we wrap up season 4 of the Big Strategy Podcast. The first theme to emerge from our work is the orthodoxy that data is the new oil. However, as our guests have told us, if we don't make the investment to ensure that the data is clean, sorted, and able to be accessed by AI, it's not that valuable. That's hard for a lot of leaders to understand, but let's dive into that. In my conversation with Leon Eisen, he challenged that thinking, and he's saying, it's not about the algorithm. It's not about how much compute power you have. He says the differentiator today is how much of that data is proprietary. There's research that says that human-generated data available on the internet is going to be extinguished by 2026 in terms of being used as a novel source to train at large language models. So what do we do? Well, this is where we're turning to companies like Scale AI and others who are generating synthetic data to augment what we as humans have produced throughout our history. It's a really scary thought, but what is not available to these LLMs? What data can Scale and others not recreate that is native to your organization? And I think this is that hidden complexity that we're looking for. It's not just about having data, it's about having the right data. The best example that I heard about this from our podcast was my conversation with Cal Lai. And Cal talked about insurance companies, and he's involved in the veterinary care space. But if we as humans were to go and get a measles vaccine, that's a code ABC123. Because the insurance companies have standardized on the Medicare billing practices. So whether you're getting that shot in Minnesota or Louisiana, if you're getting it through a PPO or through an HMO or a government-run health system, everywhere you go, an ABC123 is a measles shot. Now, the challenge is with vets, there's no standardized system. So a rabies shot, for example, could be an ABC at one clinic, and literally the other clinic across town is calling it a 123. The first clinic may record that in a digital database that's easily accessible, whereas the second clinic may still be using a paper file folder system. The point being is the insurance companies focused on human healthcare have data because it reflects a real world condition, but more importantly, it's searchable and actionable by AI. On the flip side, when we look at the veterinary care, they only have information because while one company does have a digital record, it's not labeled the same as other companies. So you can't get scale. And then on the flip side, that second veterinary clinic that has that information on a piece of paper, well, the cost to convert that information to data is probably too great to be able to recognize any benefits at this point in time. And that's the key difference, is that it doesn't matter how good your algorithm is. If you only have information and not data, you're going to be handicapped in your efforts. And Eric Siegel emphasized this when he talked about data, that it must be based on actual organizational experience. It's not just information that you gather. So anybody can go out and poll their customers, and some of that may be unique to your product or service. But is that truly differentiated by an order of magnitude from what is publicly available? And in many cases, it's not. But what we need are labeled examples of outcomes. And this is where we get back to reinforcement learning, where humans need to tell the machine learning algorithm or the AI algorithm specifically, is this piece of data valuable? So if I had a rabies shot for my dog 10 years ago and it cost $30, is that really relevant today? A lot's happened in the last 10 years. And again, I'm not saying that it's not a valuable piece of data. However, we need to give that its proper weighting going into that algorithm. So data is not as simple as because I have it, it is valuable. It may just be information. How do you turn that into data? And what we look at is that if I were to break it down into three strategic points that I often share, is the first is that you need to audit your data and be very sober about what you have. An investment in an AI solution on top of insufficient or inadequate data is a wasted investment. So ask yourself, before we invest another dollar in AI infrastructure, do we have data or is it just information? Can our systems talk to each other? Or are we sitting on digital silos that make our, quote, big data pretty worthless? Second is, do we have a data strategy? Maybe we had done some targeted migrations from on-prem to cloud. Maybe we've applied a vendor-led AI solution in a specific context. But if you haven't built that internal muscle of building and executing on a data strategy, you've got a very steep learning curve when it comes to AI, because all of your transaction logs, customer interactions, operational outcomes, etc., that's your competitive moat. And your competitors can copy the features of those algorithms, but they can't copy your organizational learning. This gets back to information versus data. So you see how this is coming together. It's that, do we have data? Okay. Now, do we have the organizational muscle to build and execute on that data? That's the next piece. Then the third piece is, and it's a little bit of a hard truth, but your AI strategy depends on buying better models. And if that's the case, well, you're probably already losing. The winners are those who, like Cal has said, he has 2.5 million recorded conversations between pet parents and the vets in his practice. And with that data set, it doesn't matter if you use Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT. If you don't have that value, you won't be able to realize AI's full potential. At the Berkeley Innovation Group, we are a strategy consultancy and AI advisory firm focused on mid-market companies looking to unlock big growth. In contrast to management consultants' typical top-down, hypothesis-driven approach, Big uses a curiosity-inspired, bottom-up approach, leveraging customer insights to drive strategy co-creation. Learn more about our approach by downloading our ebook at biginnovates.com/ebook. Now, back to the show. Theme 2 from this season was the human-AI partnership as it relates to fears of AI replacing humans. So the orthodox view is pretty simple, that AI will replace human jobs as companies seek to do more with less, drive revenue without hiring new workers, and also be able to cut costs by laying off workers. There's a counter narrative to this. And talking with Cal Lai, he said, "Why do I do what I do? Because I'm trying to empower veterinarians. Every minute that veterinarian spends away from seeing and helping a patient is a minute that vet is not making money, or more importantly, pursuing the passion with which they got into the field. Why would you become a vet if you spent your time doing paperwork?" And AI is meant to alleviate that burden. And in his opinion, and I share his perspective, is to drive more value by letting people do more of what they do best. But there are some challenges in terms of this sense of augmentation. So Hassan discusses how people actually engage more with AI systems. For example, when they walk up to his Oscar system, maybe they're at a concert and they walk up to it, they actually interact with this device for about 2 to 5 minutes instead of just a traditional garbage can where you just throw it away and it's done. And so why are they engaging in that? Well, that's kind of the human psychological side that unpacks and his very fascinating reframe of his business as a media company, more so than a recycling company. Anto, when he's talking about physical AI, found that successful AI implementation requires reskilling workers rather than replacing them. Think about the time and you've invested and money in getting your employees to become quote unquote experts in their field. Is the goal really to fire them just simply because you can save money? Or are you better off creating a narrative of people don't need to be afraid of losing their jobs. Rather, they need to reskill and upskill themselves as they try and learn new things every day. This goes back to the story I always tell, is that accountants did not lose their jobs because of AI. Accountants were able to elevate themselves and do more finance-related and strategic work and getting out of the simple debits and credits business by the use of technology. Leon Eisen shared one of the critical challenges as we bring AI more into our workflows and as human work is more augmented with AI, it's important to teach people how to recognize where there's an AI and where there's a real person. Is this a real person? Are they an avatar? Or should you be giving them the information that they're asking for? And this dovetails with what Sophie researched, was that successful AI elevates uniquely human traits like consciousness, creativity, and purpose. So what is your strategic opportunity in this moment? Anto, for example, understood what most executives miss, that successful AI implementation isn't about cutting headcount. Instead, it's about investing in your people's ability to work alongside these systems. Think back to the 1980s, 1990s. I know growing up, my dad bought the Microsoft Word for Dummies book and then the Microsoft Excel for Dummies book, etc. And he never got into those books, but they emphasized a desire to learn, a desire for mastery. But the only way that he really learned was by actually doing the work, a learn by doing process. And this Sophie's research backs this up, and she's saying that the path forward isn't asking what AI can do that humans can't. Ask, how can AI help humans do what only humans can do, but to do that better? And finally, going back to Hassan's experience with his Oscar recycling system, and before adopting AI, just literally putting a recycle bin and a garbage can next to each other, people correctly sorted recyclables about 17% of the time by his math. But when he brought in the AI system that uses image recognition to look at your can, bottle, etc., and then guide you as to where it should be sorted, that number soared to 92%, proving that AI is not a replacement. It's what happens when you design AI that amplifies decision-making rather than trying to bypass it. And so the reality of this theme is what we are training robots to do right now are the tedious tasks that humans feel like super lazy about and don't want to do. But eventually, doing those super lazy tasks will benefit humans because, as Sophie said, it's elevating our creativity, it's elevating our consciousness and giving us a greater purpose. So as you consider bringing AI into your organization, or as you roll it out more across your organization, ask yourself, what are you trying to achieve? Are you simply trying to cut costs, or is there an opportunity to elevate the people who already understand your business and your industry and to make them incredibly successful? The third theme to emerge from this season is the idea of platform thinking as it relates to AI over point solutions. The orthodox view is that companies can deploy vendor-led AI-infused solutions in specific use cases and drive short-term return on investment, so measuring in advanced technology against current KPIs. But instead, Arvind kind of places this counter narrative. He's saying you have to find your sweet spot. The more you think of your product as a bunch of Lego blocks, and the more that you understand which of those blocks are up for disruption, the easier it is for you as the executive to make that decision to disrupt and be agnostic. Now, understand you can upskill the people, you can work to retrain them to higher and better uses, but specific processes within your business, you cannot get married to them, understanding that they have to be viewed against the lens of disruption continually. The hidden complexity of this is really that building adaptable AI systems requires a different sort of architectural thinking. The hidden complexity is building adaptable AI systems requires a different kind of thinking. So Mark from Seek talked about learning to focus on analytics rather than competing as a data lake. So in his organization, he realized that he could not outscale the large players in terms of the data lake. However, his company could disrupt that analytics layer, discovering that well-funded competition and then choosing those specific battles. Sounds very Art of War, right? Know your strengths, know your enemy's weakness, and don't attack them head on, but attack them in that guerrilla style. And that's the approach that they took. Hassan emphasized this same kind of nimble thinking when he talked about the benefits of starting small and providing value before scaling. Where are we able to establish ourselves with a targeted user, an underserved need, and then just completely knock it out of the park, addressing that need, then moving on to the next set of challenges. We've all witnessed firsthand how ego and grand visions can consistently kill promising AI innovations that could have succeeded had we relied on those humble beginnings. Understanding that we're designing for human-centered needs and that AI could be a solution, not necessarily that AI is the solution. And if we rely, though, on our belief that just because we built it, they will come, that hubris is often the undoing of many well-intentioned initiatives. And then Eric brought us back to this idea that most AI projects fail because teams measure technical performance instead of business value. So again, if IT is leading an AI implementation, and I'm not necessarily saying that's wrong, but if they're putting traditional IT KPIs onto AI implementation, for example, traditional adoption rates, without recognizing that there are people in your organization who are openly going to question the value of AI, not because they doubt the technology, but because they actually fear for themselves. They fear for their jobs. That's entirely missing the point of deployment and causing stakeholders often to scrub what are otherwise really viable projects. So what is your strategic moment in all this? The three things I point to are: first, start with a humble beginning. Always start small, proving the value to a specific customer, and then hone your mentality and then just bam, go for that out of the park service so that the next time the customer has a challenge, even if you don't have the best in class solution, that customer knows that you are the best positioned to help them solve their problems. The second, just understand that measurement gap. Eric talked about, again, data scientists often celebrate the technical metrics, while on the other hand, business stakeholders are looking at profits and savings, etc. And how do you bridge this gap between what the technical metrics and the business outcomes? And without building that bridge, without translating the benefits to each set of stakeholders, without doing that in a common language, projects will get killed. And then finally, ensure your platforms are flexible. Build AI systems that can adapt when foundational models change every 6 months. Don't get stuck in a rigid architecture where you're building up expensive tech debt, etc. Understand that your strength is not the model. Your strength is the input of proprietary data, and then it's how you act on the output. And don't get married to one way of moving that information through the system. Again, design yourself like a neural network, constantly looking for the most efficient, most optimal path through a set of circumstances. And I just love, Arvind's kind of quote that wraps this all up is that you really need strong leaders who can set the right tone within the organization just to break down bureaucracies, to democratize data so that you can have AI running companies or teams. So with these three themes, let's connect the dots. What's the aha moment behind all this? Well, my sort of master thesis coming out of this fourth season of the podcast is that all of our guests revealed the same fundamental truth, and that's that we're not in an AI revolution. We're at a strategic inflection point, meaning this isn't about the technology. It's about how leaders respond to this technology. And in that case, are we willing to make a change in how we view our business, how we run our business, what plans we're making for the future? Where the companies that succeed will be those that understand the technology as an amplifier of human capability, but not a replacement for human judgment. The three-part framework, again, that I would take away from this, just if you believe, yes, this is a strategic inflection point, how do I act on this? What are the things I need to get into place? It's first, start with your data. Every company has information, but do you really have data? And you need strong leaders who can break those bureaucracies, democratize data. Second is human-centered design. Implement AI to enhance human capabilities, not to replace them. Use it to defeat this idea, this mindset in your employees of scarcity, and transfer that to an abundance mindset. Meaning a scarcity mindset is the technology will take my job, I will lose, to the sense that how much more can I contribute? If you fail to adopt AI and to this new way of working, then you are making yourself vulnerable. But we're still at a time when you can transform yourself to an abundance mindset. And how can I do more? As Cal said, just like the veterinarian who didn't go to school to do paperwork, they went to school to help animals and help pet parents. And then finally, the idea of a platform architecture. So we have the data, we're designing for humans, and we need to build that into a platform. It's got to be flexible with a modular system that can adapt as the technology evolves. For example, when the new LLM comes out, how are you ready? And as Eric Siegel said, if you're not measuring the value created by this transformation to a platform, then you're not pursuing value. If you're not measuring value, you're not pursuing value, right? You're chasing your tail. You're going with the next AI solution that your vendor provides, not necessarily what is best for your business, your people, and most importantly, your customers. Again, going back to this idea, and I'm going to wrap up here. How can we use AI? Ask, what proprietary data do we have that our customers don't? Where are people spending time on tasks that don't require human judgment? And 3, how can we design flexible systems that adapt as technology evolves? Thanks for listening to this recap of Season 4 of the Big Strategy Podcast. And when building your AI strategy, always remember, go big.